Indonesia has the largest Muslim population in the world, with approximately 225 million Muslims. This is quite surprising, of course, since Islamic teaching was originally sent down in Saudi Arabia, exactly in Mecca. In this video, I would like to trace back a little bit about the practice of veiling in Indonesia, especially since it becomes a somewhat trend and part of the popular culture even among the Javanese women.
My name is Dewi. I'm a master student of Language and Cultures of Southeast Asia in the University of Hamburg. And the purpose of this video is in order to accomplish the final assignment for one of my subjects in Geography of Southeast Asia. The topic of this video is about the practice of veiling among the Javanese women in Indonesia. And I really hope that I can provide you a neutral point of view and at least some knowledge about veiling in Indonesia as well.
On the other hand, this is a quite interesting topic since the majority of Muslims don't actually live in Saudi Arabia, where the Islamic teaching was sent down. In fact, Indonesia hosts most of the world's Muslim population, around 17.9%, while Saudi Arabia only 1 until 2%. It makes Indonesia the largest Muslim country on the planet. So, how did Islam arrive in this faraway land? It is very unfortunate that the spread of Islam in Indonesia is one of the most obscure. Due to lack of evidence and unaffirmative records of Islamization that survive, it is difficult to take one definite conclusion regarding the arrival of Islam in this country with thousands of islands. But in general, two processes probably occurred. First, indigenous Indonesians came into contact with Islam and made an act of conversion. Second possibility, foreign Asians, such as Arabs, Indians, Chinese, and so on, who were already Muslims settled permanently in an Indonesian area, intermarried, and adopted local lifestyles to such a degree that in fact they become Javanese or Malay or whatever. The emergence of Islamization on the island of Java was marked by the collapse of the Majapahit kingdom, which followed the Hinduistic Buddhistic philosophy at the end of the 15th century. Afterward, Islamic kingdoms raised, with Demak as allegedly the first Islamic kingdom on the northern coast of Java. During the transition period, the Javanese community experienced various impacts on their traditions, beliefs, social systems, and the role of women in their communities. Up until now, the amount of research on the role of Javanese women during the transitional period from Shiitic Buddhistic to the Islamic period is very limited. Since the original Muslims were mostly Arab, everything associated with them, their culture, names, and family structures, has been associated with Islam. There is no doubt that Islam was born in the Arabian Peninsula, precisely in Mecca. As the holiest city in the Islamic world and to be located in Saudi Arabia, the country itself only hosts 1 until 2% of the world's Muslim population. Meanwhile, Indonesia is home to 12.9% of the world's Muslim population. However, though, many Muslims, especially in Indonesia, believe that following Arab culture regarding Islam might lead them to the pure Islamic teaching and would bring them closer to the promised heaven. An Iranian-American writer Fatemeh Fakhrei, in an article about Arabization in Islam, criticized various attempts by the non-Arab Muslim at imitating the Arab Muslim style. She wrote, "What is troublesome about all this is that most Muslims who are non-Arabs complain that they are not seen as Muslims because they are not Arab or ethnically Middle Eastern in some cases. But when non-Arab Muslims take Arab names or wear Arab clothes under the guise of Islamic authenticity, we are all reinforcing the idea that we are not really Muslims unless we have some link to Arab culture." But the idea of covering the head itself was not originally invented by Islam. It had been practiced millennia before and spread across the Persian, Mesopotamian, Hellenic, and Byzantine civilizations. Notably, the practice of veiling also exists in Christian and Jewish traditions. When Islam came up in the 610s, veiling had been part of the Arabian custom that was invented by earlier generations and cultures spread across the Arab Peninsula. Meanwhile, in Indonesia, the term kerudung or kudung was formerly known by the Javanese women to describe the practice of veiling, and the veil used was typically made from a soft, translucent fabric like chiffon, silk, or light cotton batik. Often, it would be associated by the locals with kumar. Before the kerudung became popular, particularly during the colonial regime, the Javanese women tended to go with a simpler, long cloth called selendang. The fabric is also mostly translucent, but it did not cover entirely their hair, ears, neck, and while the kerudung does. It was worn mostly in a particular event, such as pengajian, a funeral ceremony, or whenever a formal event took place. In contemporary times, the selendang is worn mostly by the older generations who are still a parent of their traditional clothes. It is also confirmed by Susanna Brenner that the head covering, if it was worn at all, typically accompanied a tightly wrapped batik sarong and a close-fitting blouse kebaya, often low-cut of sheer material. The political history of Indonesia in the 14th and 15th centuries is not well known, for the same reason that the process of Islamization is so unclear, that is, the scarcity of evidence, in particular the lack of images of Javanese women wearing a veil during those times. Nonetheless, it is possible that around the 16th century that the upper-class women were already expected to adopt the veil because Islam decreed that physical beauty was not for public display. If this suggestion were correct, then that would give rise to the question as to why the Javanese women didn't appear wearing a veil in the old photographs taken during the colonial era. The social and political conditions on the island at that time might be the reason, as they made it difficult for the women to adopt the veil as their everyday wear. I also believe that the Dutch rulers didn't especially encourage the women to do so. They were following a policy of non-assimilation, whereby they did not interfere with the internal affairs of the natives, and there had been no attempt to westernize the Indonesians either. On the other hand, the imposition of the cultivation system, or cultuurstelsel, among the Javanese in 1830 by the Dutch and Javanese aristocrats had been leading the population into severe poverty, which, needless to say, affected the religious circumstances in various aspects. Later, in the 1901, the ethical policy was established under the authority of the Dutch Queen Wilhelmina. This policy had unexpectedly brought a far-reaching side effect in which the educational compound caused the awakening of national consciousness among the natives and led them later to various anti-colonial movements. In the 1920s, most Islamic political parties had established women's wings. They mostly paid attention to their fellow women's welfare, political consciousness, women's emancipation, or to sum up, defending their existence and demanding equality in the middle of male hegemony instead of being concerned about Islamic dress code. A significant movement of spreading Islam in Java that accelerated in the early 20th century might have become the starting point of a new awareness among the Javanese women. In any case, the number of women wearing the veil had increased significantly. However, during the Suharto regime, the practice of veiling caused various controversies. Many Indonesians would see women with the veil as something peculiar, as some would even associate them with extremist movements. They even had difficulties developing their professional career because their appearance was considered an alien culture. On the other side, any religious activities were strictly under the authorities' control that decelerated the spreading of Islamic teachings. In March 1982, the Education and Culture Department of Indonesia released a decree, or we call it Surat Keputusan, prohibiting female students to wear a headscarf at school. This new official statement received a lot of protests from various parties. Thus, President Suharto withdrew the regulation in 1991. In the meantime, some female activists were exposing their appearance by wearing a veil in public places to express their belief and also as an act of protest against the regime. After the fall of Suharto in 1998, the proliferation of Islamic fashion became even more visible in every corner of the larger cities. Shopping malls, public schools, universities, government offices, and even television shows are currently loaded with Islamic attributes. The impact of democratization after 1998 hastened Islamization in Java. Now, the Javanese middle class started to embrace busana Muslim as their everyday wear, while the traditional clothing such as kebaya and sarong becomes an occasional dress in particular, and rather special events such as Indonesian Women's Day or Hari Kartini, weddings, funerals, graduation ceremonies at the educational institutes, and so on. In this video, I would like to give a brief conclusion that the practice of veiling is very much associated with Islamic tradition, especially in contemporary times. The Middle Eastern people are frequently depicted as strongly following Islamic tradition, which makes the people outside their realm believe that their places are the sources of Islamic authenticity. In fact, the Quran was sent down to Prophet Muhammad in the Arabic language, which makes natural sense to the Muslim majority that they so see their fellow Arab Muslim as role model. However, if one would look deeper into each country in Middle East, one is likely to find a lot of dissimilarities between the actual Arab culture and what non-Arab Muslims perceive to be Arab culture. In the Islamic world, veiling is never far from controversies. In Indonesia, where the majority of the population are Muslim, veiling used to be considered as unfamiliar subculture. Frequently, women with a veil would be associated with extremist movements and a lack of nationalist spirit. As Islamization spread rapidly in the early 2000s, the public opinion about veiling in Indonesia changed remarkably. Based on my observation in social media and during my study back in Indonesia, the Javanese women have embraced the practice of veiling into various kinds of styles. Their philosophical background always varies, from an expression of their piousness to a fashion statement, to the pressure by their family, or to fulfilling the demands of a private institute they are engaged to. But I believe the massive development of information technology contributes the biggest role in leading the women in Java to achieve this Islamic transformation. To answer the general question whether wearing a veil, in terms of practicing Islamic teaching, is going to substitute the appearance of Javanese women in modern times, I must assert that veiling should be seen as an active social and cultural production, as well as a medium to express one's belief. I also believe that expression should not be forced nor forbidden. I furthermore support the idea that women always have the right to decide what to wear and what not to wear. Not only attempting to stop the time to compel the younger generations to wear traditional clothes as their everyday wear is never fair in any aspects. It is the same as imposing the rule of wearing jilbab in public school. Again, the proliferation of veiling among the Javanese women is an unfinished transformation. As long as the wheels of conversion keep on rotating, either in the political, economic, cultural, or religious aspect, another visual transformation among Javanese Muslim women will still possibly take place.